All right, now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Amy Rusa. Amy is the founder of the Safety Rack, an organization focused on closing the PPE equity gap for women in industry through education, research, and advocacy. Amy is going to share results from the Safety Rack's recent PPE equity report. Welcome, Amy. Thanks for joining us today. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Brandy, and hello and good morning to everybody. I am so excited to be here and to talk about the PPE equity gap. And if you are making time today to be a part of this conversation, I want to make sure that you have the tools and resources to be able to go back to your workplace in the next day or two and actually have meaningful conversation. And I'm trying to get this screen to go down. A little bit about myself, and hopefully this will work. I've been in the safety industry now for 20 years. I am the co-founder of the Midwest Women in Safety Conference. I am the co-founder of the My Body, My PPE campaign, and of course, the founder of the Safety Rack. It's been through my journey in safety that I have discovered that this equity gap has made a bigger impact and had more significance than I ever thought before, just talking with women in the industry. And so I want to share a little bit about my goals. Years ago, when I started the Midwest Women in Safety Conference, the conversation of the PPE equity gap came up. And a lot of women were talking about, where's my PPE? Why can't we find this? And I realized that as a safety professional, I was just buying into the myths and misconceptions of where the PPE was. And so I started going down this journey of finding the PPE and sharing it. Back in 2022, I launched the Safety Rack with the goal of just sharing that I could find this stuff and sharing what it looked like on me and where you could find it. But very quickly, during those first few months after the launch, I discovered through countless conversations with women that I needed to do more than just share. We needed to find a way to fund the research, educate employers and manufacturers, and advocate at a higher level. And thus, the Safety Rack was born. So for today, I want to talk a little bit about the challenges of PPE, which we probably already have known about for a long time or have experienced, provide some insights from the 2024 PPE Equity Report, and I want to share some best practices and solutions that you can take back today to implement in your workplace. So if you're a woman on this call and you've ever had a challenge with PPE, raise your hand. I know I can't see you, but I know if you're on this call, we've all experienced it, right? The safety vests that were too big, the gloves that were two sizes too large, hard hats falling off of our heads. This has been an issue for decades. We have been modifying our PPE, such as these women welders from World War II have done, to fit our bodies to try to protect us a little bit. But we need to get better at holding people accountable, our manufacturers and our distributors and our employers, at making sure that we don't have to modify our PPE. And the best way to do that is to understand the challenges that we have with our PPE. Fit matters, and unisex, one-size-fits-all solutions are not effective in the workplace anymore. They weren't effective before either. PPE that's ill-fitting will not protect us against the hazards in the workplace, right? We know that the PPE we wear is the last line of defense against the hazards. So if it doesn't fit well, I'm not probably going to wear it. Or worst case, it actually contributes to me becoming a walking hazard in the workplace. These two photos are a great example of the difference between properly fitted and not properly fitted PPE. Which would you want to wear as a woman in the workplace? If you're an employer watching this, which one looks more comfortable for an employee to wear? And which one looks safer? It goes also just beyond the basics of the clothing. It goes to the hard hats we wear, right? If you're a petite woman, your hard hat probably shifts a lot when you're walking because it's too big. We all know that eye protection can create a lot of gaps with our eyeglasses because the narrow faces of women are much vastly different than men's. Fall protection is notorious for being uncomfortable as a woman because it's designed for a man's body. When we're not just looking at being comfortable in the chest when we're wearing our fall protection, but also in the pelvic floor area when we're walking and moving with it. Hand protection, I know Sally's going to touch on this later. One of the major issues I've seen and heard from multiple women is I just don't bother wearing my hand protection anymore. So they're taking their gloves off and they're being injured in the workplace. And then foot protection. The industry was notorious for a very long time on shrink it, pink it. And what that basically meant was they took a man's shoe and they shrunk it down and thought it was okay for women's feet. When in reality, the way we walk, the way our weight is distributed is vastly different again. So overall, we're not small men. These are major things that we need to take in consideration when we're protecting women. And it goes a little bit beyond just these things. We need to get down to the nitty gritty with maternity wear and the availability and access that women are going to need in the workplace. And if you're in an industry that requires flame resistance, you're probably going to need a bra, right? I would not in a million years want to wear an underwire in a job that required me to wear FR gear. These are things that over the course of the last few years, I've had discussions with employers and women in the field. And it's very interesting to me that when I talk to employers and we talk about these things that women need, they're like, I wouldn't have thought that they needed an FR bra. And some of that I got back was, it never affected me, so I didn't think about it. So if we know there's a problem and there's still an equity gap, what do we need next? For me, being the founder of the safety rack, I needed to get more data. I just didn't feel like we had enough data to really move the conversation along. There's been some really great reports over the last few years, but for me, I just wanted to push it up a notch and create more awareness. And that led to in late 2023, myself, Dee Ray, who is a welding specialist and PPE specialist for the safety rack, and Emily Schloberg, who is the founder of Juner Jones. We were on a call such as this, sharing all our insights and solutions to the PPE equity gap with women. And we kept finding the same repetitive conversation coming up. I didn't know it was there. I don't think my distributor has access to it. I'm still being injured in the workplace. And so after that phone call, we got together and decided we wanted to do something big to create more awareness and to also collect some data. And so the My Body, My PPE campaign was born and it launched in April of last year. It was a global campaign using the hashtag that would allow women to share their stories on social media and also highlight the manufacturers who were providing PPE and workwear designed for women. 505 women participated globally in the survey. And this month, during Women in Construction Week, we launched the report on the Safety Rack website. So you can download the full report after this event and go through it. But I want to share some insights from that report. When it comes to knowing if women have access to female-specific PPE in the workplace, we found that 70% said no. What I thought was surprising with this is we still had 29% saying yes. And comparing that to other data in the industry that was existent, that was a significant growth. So we're seeing that. We're moving the needle just a little bit, but we could be moving it a lot faster if we're able to provide the resources and tools to the employers, to the manufacturers, but also to the end users. When we dove into the subject about access, we asked if they were aware of any workplace initiatives and policies aimed at addressing the unique sizing and fit requirements. 83% came back saying no. So if you're an employer on here today, when you go back, what is your goal to addressing this? How are you going to look at your policies for procurement, your policy and for PPE? What initiatives can you take with your safety committee or your D&I committee to help close this gap at the end of the day? This was one aspect of the report that we really wanted to dive into. We wanted to learn about that access thing, and we know that it's still a big gap that needs to be closed. But we also wanted to look at how are women being injured in the workplace? Is this a large injury rate? Is it not? What's the potential here? So we asked, have you ever encountered a situation where the lack of properly fitting PPE hindered your ability to perform your job safely? No shocker here, 66% said yes. Now, 33% said no, and I thought that was great. But when we took this a step further in our survey and we asked, have you personally experienced a situation where the ill-fitting PPE caused injury? 20% said yes. 79 said no. That's pretty good data, right? We only have 20% saying they got physically injured by their PPE, but that's still significant. That's 104 women out of 504 that surveyed saying that they have been injured in the workplace. So we know if we look at the iceberg theory of where injuries happen, how many near misses are actually taking place in the workplace that causes that one injury to happen. And for that, we found when we asked about the near misses, a resounding, what was it? 62% said that they had a near miss experience while wearing air-fitting PPE. So very, very significant in the workplace. So we have this data. What's the solution now that we have more information saying that this is a problem in the workplace? I have two ways to kind of break this down. The first one is for employers. I talked about earlier, having homework that we're going to take back to the workplace. Well, here's 4 steps for you. First is going to go back and reevaluate as EH&S professionals, as managers. What is your existing PPE program? What's it like at a procurement level? What do your policies state? If you're in the United States, you know that OSHA just changed some of its construction standard PPE language to say that PPE has to fit the employee. Does your own program state that out loud, or are you just going and sourcing bulk sizing because you get a discount? One of the things in this evaluation I want you to do is to go back and conduct a JHA, a job hazard analysis. Host a focus group with your end users, your employees, to find out what is working and what's not. In the 20 years that I've been doing safety, a lot of times when I've started at a new employer or I've started consulting with somebody, I have found out that a lot of it was just bulk pricing and it wasn't comfortable for the employee. It was actually still hindering them. Your end users, your employees are the best source of information during your evaluation. Now I want you to take that evaluation, host your focus groups, and go educate yourself on what PPE offerings are out there and seek additional feedback from your end users. At this point, as you're educating, you're also going to be sourcing stuff with your distributors out there and making sure that your distributor knows you want like for like items going forward. Unisex is no longer an option for you. It's going to be men's sizes and women's sizes. This pushback helps us close the gap because a lot of times I've heard distributors say, oh, there's not much demand out of it. There's not much demand if we don't make noise about it needing to be a demand in the marketplace. So go back and work with your distributors and then make sure that you're reevaluating your PPE yearly or biannually, whatever works for you, to make sure it is truly fitting your workers. A female worker should not come into the workplace and have to wait weeks to access her PPE. It should be there before her first day on the job. That's your homework as employers, and I encourage you to take this back, reflect, and make actionable steps. You are going to hit some roadblocks along the way too with this. There's going to be some pushback, right? There's not enough demand for women's PPE. Distributors may claim that. It's been a myth for a while now. We know that maybe 5 to 10 years ago, that might have been a truer statement than it is today. You might have to educate your distributor a bit on where this PPE is. On the safetyrack.org site, we have an entire directory of every brand that meets our specifications for being female specific. So if you need to reference something, you can go there. Women can just use the unisex or small men's sizes. Again, we can't. We know this is an issue. We've seen the pictures, we've seen the data. Some distributors may argue this and simply try to push you to the unisex options. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to stand firm in the belief that this is what we need to do to keep our workers safe. And then, of course, one of the other ones you might get back is, well, the PPE is going to be more expensive. And I think this was true about 5 to 10 years ago when we had less to stock, but more is being stocked. And if you set that expectation with your distributor, those prices are going to come down. Now, if you're not an employer and you don't have a say over policies and procurement decision makers, you're still an ally and advocate in this space. And allies and advocates seem to have a stronger force for change. So advocate for the inclusive sizing and design in your workplace. Support the policy changes where you can, whether that's through your safety committee or DE&I program, and do your own awareness and education, right? The more we increase our awareness and educate ourselves about this equity gap, the easier it is to hold the conversations to close it. Because representation matters. As we advocate for more women to be involved in this process of design and selection of PPE, the quicker we're going to close this gap. And it all comes down to having an ROI on the return of investment. When we can retain women in the workforce because they feel safe at work, it reduces the overall cost of hiring new workers. It builds a reputation for being an inclusive employer who values the safety of every worker, and it creates more reliability among your workers. Employees who feel safe at work are going to excel in the workplace. So this is just some of the insights from the PPE equity report. And I hope that as you listen to the conversations today, you continue to make that list and goals of what you want to set when you return to the workplace, whether you're an employer or ally, because at the end of the day, your voice matters and change needs to happen for us to create a safer workplace. So with that, I'm going to kind of wrap it up and see what Q&As we have.
Thanks, Amy. Um, we've got a couple questions coming in. Just a reminder to everyone, if you haven't already done so, please enter your questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to as many as we can. Amy, what surprised you from your research?
I think what surprised me was the gap is still there between the employer and distributor, right? And I think some of that's just an awareness piece, more so on the employer, because I had a lot of women and I had this notion for the longest time that the employer just didn't care. But as I've gone through these conversations over the years with the employer, it became quite apparent that it was like, we just didn't know. But now that we know, we're working on the steps to close it. Now we know the product's there because they were being told, oh, it's not there. Unisex is fine. It's going to cost you more. But once you start the education piece with the employer, now you got the pushback to get it closed faster.
Okay, great. Um, what does OSHA consider fitting the employee?
They keep that very vague for a reason. But what we did find is that in the general industry maritime standard, it already had the language in there, and it's not gender specific of saying that the employer must ensure the PPE fits the employee. For me, what that means is it's not going to be two sizes too big or baggy or create an issue where it's going to get caught on something or trip the person up. So you got to look for the inclusive sizing options here. And this really goes back to the employer and the EH&S professional to make sure that they are sourcing those items.
Okay. Just scrolling through to see all the comments. Has there been any traction on fall protection harnesses for women?
There is currently one Fall Tech in the United States makes a female harness, and then there is a new one that's going to be released soon. I don't know when, but when it does get released, we will add it to the directory under fall protection on the Safety Rack website. It is one that is very limited, especially FR fall protection harnesses. And that is something that I want to work with through the Safety Rack with those manufacturers to close that equity gap.
Okay, and we've got quite a few questions coming in asking to confirm where people can find the list of distributors. Is that the safetyrack.com?
Yes, there is a directory that we've built out where you can filter whether you just need PPE, maternity wear, FR, fall protection, and just because I'm a dog mom, there's some doggy high vis PPE added in there as well.
All right. Here's a question. As a prime contractor home builder. We employ a lot of different trades and subcontractors on site. How accountable can we hold these companies on PPE? I can push for the workers of our company pretty easily, but I'm not sure about trades working under us as prime.
Lead by example. Let them know what your policy is and stance on that. That's the start, right? And have that conversation. It's a critical conversation to have. And if other employers are doing it and others see it, they're going to start having that conversation, right? Because if I'm on a job site and I have unisex or men's PPE and I see five other females with regular PPE, I'm probably going to go back to my employer and be like, "Hello, why do they get that and I get this?" Right?
Mhm. So you mentioned this is a conversation we've been having for a while now. What do you see as the biggest barrier that's still preventing employers from investing in PPE tailored for women?
It's just making the time and knowing that it's not a cost thing like we think it is, right? I think when you work with procurement, a large part of procurement's focus is I'm going to buy in bulk and get this discount, and it's going to be great because I'm saving money for my employer. But when we look at it from this angle of if I spend maybe even just a few dollars more and get female PPE, you're actually reducing the risk of an injury in the workplace. And when the average workers' comp cost is like $40,000, you're going to save a lot on the back end. You may never actually really see it, but it's going to be there. And then you also have the unseen part of that, which is if I feel valued and safe, I'm going to stay longer. So you're going to reduce your turnover rate and the cost associated with that as well.
Right. Have you seen availability for plus sizes in women's PPE?
It as I think I probably border on being a plus size woman, which is also the reason why I started doing a lot of this. There is a lot out there now. I can probably mark some of that on the website so that you guys can see the size ranges, but there are several brands actually about to launch that are focused on being more plus size for that workforce.
Okay, great. Someone wants to know if your directory includes Canadian suppliers.
It is a global directory.
Perfect. I'm going to issue a last call for questions and just give a couple seconds for any last minute questions to come in. All right, I think that's it. So, Amy, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, sharing this information with us. We really
Thanks
appreciate
for
it.
having me. Guys, have a great day.